implosion in Iraq has led to an explosion at the pump. Can you say $6 gas? Well, it could come sooner than you think after this. All right, to Iraq now, where the government is scrambling big time to protect its capital right now. A terrorist group, in fact, a variety of them are on the move and is taking over Iraqi cities as they make their way toward Baghdad. But who exactly are these guys? National security correspondent Jennifer Griffin's been looking into it at the Pentagon. Jennifer.
Neil, the leader of the Sunni Jihad insurgency is well known to the U.S. In fact, he was in U.S. custody 4 years ago at Camp Bucca in southern Iraq. But he was released. It's not clear why. The FBI has had a $10 million reward on Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi for some time. He eulogized Osama bin Laden and pledged to carry out 100 attacks in the wake of bin Laden's death. Even al-Qaeda excommunicated him for being too extreme. Reports from the areas in Iraq that have already fallen to ISIS and the fighters loyal to Baghdadi are suggesting the al-Qaeda offshoot is imposing Sharia law and beheading Iraqi troops. The Pentagon estimates that the number of fighters loyal to ISIS is in the few thousands, which should not be difficult for the 600,000 strong Iraqi army to withstand. The speed at which they took territory surprised U.S. defense officials after the U.S. spent $17 billion training the Iraqi military.
I'm certainly disappointed by the performance of some Iraqi security force units with respect to the challenges that they have faced in the last few days.
Now, Shia fighters are joining the calls from Shia leaders in Baghdad to join the fight. The conventional wisdom among U.S. officials is that the ISIS fighters won't have as easy a time taking the Iraqi capital.
I don't think they can take Baghdad. I think they can cause a lot of trouble in the provinces where they've been active, partly because, remember, they have a loose back door here. That's the back door into Syria. So when when the heat gets turned up, they have a place to go. I think this fight will go on for a long time.
Meanwhile, the Pentagon has plans to give the president options. Neil.
Jennifer, thank you very much. Well, in the middle of all of this, oil is just gushing as Iraq starts imploding. Crude oil now at a 9-month high. On the corner of Wall and Broad, we're seeing a little bit of green today, but a whole lot more red for the week. Nicole Petalides at the New York Stock Exchange. Nicole.
Neil, and absolutely right. We saw oil moving above $107 a barrel. We saw a move of about more than 4% this week for oil to 9-month highs, as you noted. And the concern for Americans here at home really is gasoline prices. We continue to watch gasoline prices on the rise and what rising oil could ultimately mean for Americans. Don't forget, back on Memorial Day, we were about $3.58. We're currently at around $3.65. And I wouldn't be surprised, according to what I've been reading, $4 could certainly be in our future. That's something that we continue to focus on. As far as what we saw on Wall Street, you noted up arrows today. We managed to bounce back a little bit today. The Dow was up 41 points at 16,775 is where it closed, up 1/3% for the major averages today. But for the week, all three of the major averages did lose ground slightly. A couple of top stories for you. We saw Priceline buying Open Table. That's where you get your reservations on Open Table, right? That was a $2.6 billion deal in cash. We saw Intel hitting a 10-year high on good PC demand, and we saw GM doing more recalls, 4 more recalls. That's 600,000 vehicles. So now we're up to over 14 million vehicles this year, Neil. So that's not good news, but we had plenty of winners. So that's what we saw here on Wall Street. And hey, happy Father's Day to you and all the great dads and granddads out there.
Thank you very much, Nicole. Appreciate it. Nicole Petalides. Well, back to oil and how much higher it could go. Andy Lippow has some ideas. He follows it very, very closely. Andy, what do you think?
Well, I think in the near term, we can see $110 pretty easily just on the violence as it encroaches and nears Baghdad. But the bigger issue for the oil market is if we see a supply disruption out of the southeast and exports into the Persian Gulf are affected. And in that case, the loss of supply could see oil go to $125.
Now, Andy, normally in these type of situations, whatever spikes we see are short-lived. In other words, markets calm down, cooler heads prevail, and the hope is that it doesn't escalate. But there are indications here this very well could escalate. And if it spreads to sort of like a region-wide conflagration, then what?
Well, then I'm really concerned because Iraq is exporting 2.5 million barrels a day of oil, and while very little of that comes to the U.S., it affects the European and Asian markets, and all of a sudden there's a scramble for the available supply, especially in light of the fact that 90% of Libyan oil is off the market.
Now, everyone's watching Saudi Arabia, too. Why are they so important? They control the spigot. They can control the supply. They can increase the supply to mitigate this. But I'm not nearly the expert you are. Wouldn't it be in their vested interest to wait this out, enjoy the high prices while they have them, because they're getting richer as this ensues?
Well, they're certainly quite happy, and that's why you saw OPEC roll over their quotas. So don't expect the Saudis to make any moves unless they actually see oil come off the market from Iraq. And if the Iraqi oil was lost, the next thing you'll see is calls for a strategic petroleum release, not only in the U.S., but in Europe and Asia.
We'll watch closely. Andy, very good seeing you. Thank you.
Thank you.
We see all of this fighting going on in Iraq today, and remember all of this fighting in Iraq years ago. We'll talk with an Iraq War veteran, what he's watching, what he's seeing, and what he's wondering. Was it all worth it?